And again, we are talking all about the SNO Story List widget. If you are not familiar with the term widget, that refers to all of these kind of blocks of content that make up the body of your site's homepage. So basically, everything in the center part of my site here, all of these blocks of content are what we call widgets. And there are a lot of different types of widgets that you can use on your site. We'll see that in a minute. But the one that we are focusing on today is the SNO Story List widget. So to get to the location where I'm going to control my site's widgets, it's called the Widget Control Panel. I am going to hover over this SNO Dashboard tab here in the upper left-hand corner of my site. And then it is the third drop-down here for the Widget Control Panel. And I think this is a good time to mention that widgets are considered design work on your website, which means that only users with the administrator user role on the site are going to be able to access this widget control panel and make any sort of edits to your site's widgets. So that said, I've got my widget control panel set up here. On the right, I've got all of my different available widget areas. In other words, places on my site where I can place widgets or display widgets. And if I just kind of pop these open here, you'll see I can see in each area the different widgets that are occupying that space currently. So all of these ones that are labeled home, those are the ones that I'm going to be working with today. Those are the widget areas available on my homepage. On the left, I have all of my available types of widgets. And as I said a minute ago, I've got lots of different widgets to choose from. But today we are focused on the SNO Story List widget here. Now we do call this our bread and butter widget or our Swiss Army knife widget. This is the widget that chances are you are using the most on your site. And really that is because it is the most straightforward way to display a category of stories. And it's really versatile. There's lots of different ways that you can set it up depending on how you want it to look and the space that it's going to be occupying on your site. So again, the SNO Story List widget that we'll be going over today is probably the #1 widget that we see used on most of our client sites. So anytime you're placing a widget here, whether it's the SNO Story List in this case or a different widget, this interface is all click and drag. So I'm going to grab that widget here, drag it into the space that I want. In this case, I'm going to place this one in my home top full width widget area. And then as soon as I drop that widget, it's going to pop open all of my different options for setting it up. So we'll go through these options for the SNO Story List widget today. The first one that I just want to mention here is that you'll notice the SNO Story List widget has both a primary area and a secondary area option here. So you can either use just the primary area, just the secondary area, or you can do a combination of the two. And I will kind of show you all of those options this morning. So that's the first thing just to note here with the SNO Story List widget. Starting over here in the left column, I am going to first be prompted to select a category of stories that I want displayed in this widget. So I'm going to keep this one at recent stories, but if I wanted to do maybe news or opinion or sports, whatever category I want this widget to display, I'm going to select that here. Then from there, I'm going to choose the number of stories. I'm going to do maybe 4 in this case, but you can adjust that there. I can do things like adjust the headline size. And then I have a variety of options that I can select from here. If I want to show the teaser or not, the byline, the date, the category name, etc. And then some options for centering some of that text as well. So I'm going to leave most of those as is for now. Then in this second column, I've got some design options. So because I am set to display 4 stories, and because I am placing this in that home top full width area that's going to stretch all the way across the top of my site, I'm going to actually shift this to 4 columns. That way those 4 stories are going to kind of span all the way across. And I will just throw in, this is a really popular kind of configuration that we're seeing right now, is using this SNO Story List widget to display a list of stories horizontally across the full width of your site. So maybe something that you would be interested in trying there. The media type, I can switch that here. The default is going to be to pull in the photo or the featured image for your stories. If I switch that to video, this is going to give you the option if you have used the video embed in a story and you've embedded a video using that video embed option, it will pull in that video on the homepage for you. So I'm going to start with photo, but I will be sure to show you what that video option looks like in a minute here. I can adjust the media dimensions here. Our recommendation would be 3:2 horizontal ratio for your photos. That's just going to be the best display of them, but you have some other options here if you wanted to change that. I can adjust the text area background color. By default, this is going to be a very, very light gray color, but I always like to kind of change that to white just to match my site background color, but you can change it to whatever you want. And then lastly, the text color here. So I'm not going to do anything with the secondary area at this point. I'll show you that in a couple minutes. So my last option over here on the right would be to choose a widget style, which is going to kind of determine things like the title bar up above here, the background color behind the widget, the border, and things like that. So these widget styles can be customized in your design options of your site, which I won't be talking about in today's webinar. I'm just going to go ahead and select, we'll do style 2. Once I am finished setting up my widget, I'm going to go ahead and save it here in the corner. And now if I close out, I can see that new SNO Story List widget in my home top full width area here. And if I go to my site and refresh, I should see there is my SNO Story List widget, and it is 4 columns here in the home top full width area. Now, if I want to go in and edit a widget, I'm just going to click on it here in the widget control panel, and it's going to pop open all of those editing options for me. So right now you can see my media type is photo here. So I'm seeing the featured images for these stories. If I switch that to video instead, and then save here, again, this is going to be kind of the option that will pull in those videos that I have embedded and have them playable right from that widget. So this is a really great option. This is the widget that I would recommend using if you have like a broadcast or a video category, or if you have like a podcast that you want to display on the homepage. Make a category for your podcast, embed that podcast in the story, and then you can set this widget to display the videos or display the podcasts. All right, so that is everything here, just using the primary area of that SNO Story List widget. I'm going to move that widget into a more narrow space here. So rather than the home top full width, I'm going to shift it down over here to this kind of narrow sidebar area. So everything, as I mentioned earlier, is click and drag here. So I'm going to grab that and move it to that home top left area. And then I'm going to click into edit it. So as I said, you've got kind of 3 options here. The first one, just use the primary area. The second one that I'll show you here is just using the secondary area. So I'm going to switch my primary area to 0 here. I'm not going to have any stories in the primary area. And I'm going to activate the secondary area. The biggest difference that you will see is that the secondary area stories are going to be a lot smaller. The photos are going to be smaller. The text is going to be smaller. So I think if you're using just the secondary area, it's really best in kind of narrow sidebar spaces like the one that I'm placing it in now. So again, I'm going to activate that secondary area here. I can choose how many stories I want. I can choose things like how do I want my photos, or do I want photos? I could do text only, or I could do bullet points as well, but I like to keep the photo showing, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I can choose things like centering my headline vertically, adjusting my headline size here, changing my photo alignment, and then showing the byline or the date or both of those if I want. So now if we save, I've changed it so that there are no stories in my primary area and 5 stories in my secondary area. So if I refresh the homepage here and look, there I can see that same SNO Story List widget, but much different appearance here. You can see how much smaller those stories are in the secondary area there. So again, really good if you are placing this widget in some type of sidebar space to utilize just that secondary area. Now, the last option here would be using both the primary and the secondary. And I would say this is probably the most popular way that I see people using the SNO Story List widget. They'll have maybe a story or two in their primary area and then some stories in the secondary area as well. So I'm going to go ahead here and adjust my number of stories in the primary area. I'm just going to do 1 up there. And then in my secondary area here, I want to change this secondary area location because I'm going to keep it in this kind of narrow sidebar space over here. I actually want this secondary area to show up below my primary area. So I'm going to switch that to below there. And I'm going to leave the rest of these settings kind of the same. We'll go ahead and save. And now I can see that same SNO Story List widget, but it's got 1 story up in the primary area, displayed a little bit larger, and then 5 stories down below here in the secondary area. Yeah, the order of stories is going to be based on when those stories were published. So anytime I publish a new story, in this case, this is my recent stories, but if I were to change this to, let's say, news, now update my category here to news. So if I were to go publish a new news story right now, that new story would get pulled into this widget and it would be up at the top here in the primary area. Then if I were to publish another news story, that story would get pushed down into the secondary area. And so these widgets do kind of automatically update themselves. But again, that newest story would be up in the primary area here. And then as newer stories are published, it would be kind of pushed down to the secondary area until it gets to the very end. And eventually those older stories will kind of get pushed out of that widget. I hope that answers that question. One thing I want to just make sure to mention in here. So right now I've got this widget, the SNO Story List widget set to display 1 story in the primary and 5 stories in the secondary down below. So that's the display that I'm seeing here. If I switch this secondary area to beside, I'm going to notice here on my homepage, nothing happens. It doesn't switch the secondary area to be beside the primary area. And the reason for that is because these widgets will automatically adjust themselves as needed or when needed. And so the reason that it's not displaying those stories beside the primary area is just because I don't have enough space here to do that. Because I'm putting it in such a narrow widget area there, this widget is adjusting itself and saying, basically there isn't enough room to display them beside. But if I were to switch this to back into that home top full width area, and same thing, I've got 1 story set in the primary, 5 stories in the secondary beside the primary. Now that I've placed it in a little bit wider area, it can display with the settings that I've selected. And you can see that the secondary area is now beside that primary area. Yeah, that primary area width, you can adjust that here. So if you wanted that primary area photo width to be a little bit wider, like if I bump it up to 65%, that's going to just take up more space in the primary area. And that width option will only appear if you've got the secondary area set to display beside the primary area, because basically it's asking you how do you want to split the 2 sides of the widget. So you get to adjust that here. You have some different options for the width of that. That is kind of everything in terms of your different configuration options for the SNO Story List widget. So again, you can do just primary, just secondary, or a combination of the two. The other thing I want to just mention in here is that up until this point, we have really just been working with the basic design options for this widget, which, as we've seen, you can create really nice looking widgets just with these basic options. So if widgets are fairly new to you, I would say just kind of stick with the basics till you get comfortable with them. However, there are some advanced design options that you can toggle on here. So if I click on this blue button to show those advanced design options, I think for the SNO Story List widget in particular, there are a lot of really good advanced design options to play around with here. So again, to get to them, I'm going to just click on Show Advanced Design Options, and then you'll see all of my columns kind of expand a little bit, and I have more things that I can play around with in here. So I won't go over all of these, but I will show you kind of some of my favorite things in the advanced design options for the SNO Story List widget. Starting in this left column here, I have a lot more control when I toggle on those advanced design options to adjust my text size for things. So for instance, I could, if I'm looking at this here, I could make my teaser text a lot smaller if I wanted to. Same thing with my byline or my date. I could adjust that text and make it a little bit smaller. I could bold it if I want to, just for a little different appearance. The other thing that I really like here in this left column, when you've got those advanced design options toggled on, is the option to display a view all link at the bottom of the widget so people can click on that and see the rest of the stories in that category. So that's a really popular advanced design option that I often see selected for the SNO Story List widget. Kind of moving into the second column here, again, things that you will see with those advanced design options toggled on. You can add a corner radius if you wanted to do that, kind of round out your photos. And there are some different settings in here for padding and spacing between the stories or within the widget here. The one that I definitely see a lot in this second column when people utilize the advanced design options is adding dividing lines between the stories. So that's a really popular option there. Some other things in here that you can try, like hover highlighting. So basically when I hover over the story, it'll have a background color applied to it. Moving into the third column over here, most of these are the same as when I just was using the basic design options. One kind of interesting one, though, is the option to choose a different photo dimension if you've got those photos set to display in the secondary area. So again, this is just kind of personal preference, but I like to do a circular photo dimension if I'm using the secondary area. I think it looks kind of neat. Show you what that looks like in a second here. And then again, the other thing that I see often utilized in the secondary area when you've got your advanced design options toggled on are those dividing lines. So kind of the same as this column over here, but showing dividing lines between those secondary area stories here. So those are some of the advanced design options. I'm going to go ahead and save my changes here. And if we go take a look at this widget, there I can see a couple different things. I can see that adjusted text size there. I can see those gray dividing lines between my stories. You can see the circular option for my secondary area photos there. And then also that view all link has now been added to the bottom of the widget. And so again, like I said, you can create a really good looking widget just with the basic design options, but there are definitely more things that you can control and customize if you want to toggle on those advanced design options. That is the SNO Story List widget and kind of all of your different options for setting it up and designing it. And at this point, that is kind of everything that I had planned on going through in today's webinar. Hopefully you feel a little bit more comfortable or have a better sense of how that SNO Story List widget works, and all of the different ways you can set it up and use it. Like I said at the beginning, this is really like the bread and butter widget for displaying categories on your site. So chances are you will use this one a lot, and hopefully you're feeling a little more comfortable with all of its settings. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stop my recording.